welcome to Safely Divergent. This is episode 1. We're your hosts. I'm Eleanor.
I'm Kirsty.
Kirsty, can you believe it?
No. This has been a long time coming.
It has. We've been planning and hoping and ready to do this for literally a couple years now.
Yeah, I remember it was November of 2022. We had gotten off a plane, and I said, Eleanor, I want to do a podcast. And the face you gave me looked a little like
we're both very introverted. We both don't like a lot of attention on us. It doesn't sound like something that we would want to do, but the more we talked about it and the more we explored it, the more excited we got.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about why we want to do this.
We have a lot of conversations on the couch, and just we've come a long way, and we really want to share that with other people and want people to feel like they're in the conversations with us and not this content dump, get to know us, get to know, where our minds are.
Yeah, we definitely want to build a community through this. We are not all knowing, and we'll say that a million times, probably every single episode. We're not all knowing. We don't claim to be, but we've learned a lot about ourselves and each other through this process. And we're just really excited to share information with others and
learn from others,
get to know others, and build a community and learn from others. So
the more that we put ourselves out there and expose ourselves, then the more contact we have to other people and different mindsets. And that's what we want. We both want to keep evolving and growing. And, again, I feel like the more vulnerable we are, the more access to different people we get to be with. So
that's right. And our name is Safely Divergent. And so the first couple episodes, we definitely want to spend some time, what is that? What does it mean to us? Where did we come up with that? So we do want to share a little bit about us. And it's funny because we're people that really hate talking about ourselves. It's difficult for us, but a little bit of background about us just so our listeners know who we are together. And I've always just been very reserved, very the kind of quiet kid. I'm super into Enneagram personality types, and I am through and through a type 9, the peacemaker. I avoid conflict. I want, serendipity and peace and all this with my circle and my community. I've always had rock collections. Even since I was a little kid, this age, second grade, I have a box of rocks that I still have at my parents' house. And, we'll talk about this later, but we talk about our special interests. And a lot of this podcast is going to be about what tends to be your special interest, right? Yeah. The brain and the body and all this. And we'll get into all that. But when you were talking to me about what are your special interests, I'm I have a lot of little ones, yeah. Right? So I love all things true crime. I love morbid facts. I love learning about animals and history, and it's hard to tack it into one area. So when somebody says tell me about yourself, that's a really hard question. Yeah. I think it is for anybody. So a tiny little glimpse of me, and then professionally, it sounds so cliche, but I really like helping people. I'm definitely a caregiver personality. My passion is helping people with communication barriers and helping people support their own autonomy and independence. And that's, professionally where my passion comes through. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to be doing this podcast with you.
Yeah. Give, again, the people that we work with as well, give them a platform and get to hear more and more about all the differences that we all experience. I just wanted to backtrack a little. We always say, I know a lot about a little, and you know a little about a lot. So both of those kind of come together and is what is going to be seen.
Our brains work very differently, and that's one of the main points we're going to take away from this podcast and hopefully share a little information about is we are all diverse in the way that we think. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's hear a little bit about you, Kirsty.
Yes, like we said, we really enjoy talking about ourselves. That's one thing. I am sarcastic, and I have to work on that a bit and kind of at least pointing out my sarcastic comments because I know that doesn't always come across, but I am very sarcastic. I don't love talking about myself, and we've talked about this too, we're going to share more about us naturally along the way. This feels a bit unnatural having to share all of who we are in a little clip here. But I feel like I'm very complex. I feel like if I take an Enneagram test, it shifts just based on the time of day that I'm taking it. So I don't know what Enneagram I am. For me, when I first enter a room, I feel like I'm really an introvert. And it takes me time to warm up, but then I feel like I really turn into an extrovert, which I think for people who know me, they're like, you're not an introvert. But it does. It takes me a bit to really get comfortable and warm up for sure. I don't know if we have an example the other day. We were going for a walk and our friends happened to be on a boat and hollered and said like, hey, come on the boat. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, this is happening. And in the past, that would have really made me nervous because one, I don't like to be flexible, like spontaneously. But naturally it happened and
there were a lot of people we did not know on the boat and they all knew each other. So we were kind of the oddballs out. And yeah, it started off like you and me were off to the side, not, mingling with ourselves and whatnot. But then by the end, Chris,
I was dropping it low. I was dancing. I was having a good time, but I wasn't
everyone's best friend.
Yeah.
But that was at the end of a 3-hour boat ride after an hour and a half of not really talking with anyone.
Yeah.
So
and that's
okay. Some warming up.
I take some warming up and that is really okay. Eleanor mentioned it. I really love the brain. I love the brain and the body connection and then how that amounts to human interaction. I'm constantly looking for new information related to that. But that's, I think Eleanor's a little overwhelmed. She always gets my information and she's like, maybe we can share that with someone else. So you have someone else to talk to about this. So that's a piece of
like I hear this information for hours every day. I can't be the only one that's interested in this information. So
hopefully we're hoping out there someone is also interested so Eleanor can take a break. Please. I guess something else a little about myself is I would maybe describe myself as being like very hyper empathetic. I feel like I can walk into a room and just feel how others are feeling and really pick up on things that maybe the average person doesn't. So much so that watching shows or movies is really hard for me because I can cognitively know that it's a storyline, it's created, it's not real, but my body doesn't know that. And I just take on all those emotions from the shows. And your family likes to laugh at me because they're like, is this movie too scary for you?
Is this Disney movie too scary? Because Kirsty will be pacing around the living room or behind the couch. No, you have your comfort shows, like New Girl, for example, which you've watched I don't know how many times, but you get to certain chunks where you don't like the plot line because it's too much conflict, and we skip over those episodes, and then we carry on where it gets pleasant again.
Yeah, so. I'm more of a nonfiction type girly. I like just the real world. Give me biographies. Give me that type of information. That's the route that I tend to go. But occasionally I will, move outside of that to watch some movies, but not usually by choice.
That's right. All right. So who, like us as a pair?
Yeah,
we met in grad school.
Yeah,
didn't intermingle a ton during school. We were just had very different personalities, and then we had the chance, and we were lucky enough to get to live on the beautiful island of Oahu for a few months, the two of us, and work together for an internship, and we became best friends and inseparable. And the rest is history. We fell in love. We've been together for
about 10 years, almost a decade together.
Nearly a decade. We spend a lot of time together. We're my best friend, and I think it's really neat because we've, as anybody, and they're like going through these years, changed a lot over a decade, but we've learned so much about ourselves as individuals, and it's helped us as a couple, as a pair, as a partnership so much.
And I think in the beginning years, it was like we really put so much effort on like helping the other person. And once we shifted to like, hey, I have to focus on myself and understand my needs and then that person can help me. We've really like come into like being able to support each other and accommodate each other in different areas. And I think that's really exciting. I think we have really good communication, and our growth is continuous, and we want to keep moving. But I think that is another piece of what we want to share, is how we got to this point, and again, how we keep moving in the right direction. We got to travel for a year. We lived in a van together.
We'll have plenty of stories of that year, because it was our highest of highs and lowest of lows.
Yes. We found that the tapping of rain on a tin roof can
drive you wild. So,
yes.
We'll have plenty of stories, but we learned so much about ourselves and ourselves as a pair that year.
Here we are.
Here we are. All right. You are going to learn so much about us naturally. It's really hard to be like, how do we summarize who we are as individuals and as a couple in a few minutes?
And I think too, this piece is probably one of the pieces that kept us away from doing episode 1. Like, it was like, how do we approach this? What do we say? So just short, simple. Again, naturally, we want you to find more out about us and who we are. But this is hard for us. It's hard to, again, summarize life in a little blurb. But
all right. Well, let's move on.
Please.
Our title is Safely Divergent, but what do we even mean?
Right.
What are we talking about when we say divergent?
That is a great question. And we've got we really believe in this name, and it does take some explaining, but it really, Safely and Divergent, really encompasses everything that we do want to talk about. All of these different, titles or topics. Like it just encompasses it all. And for us, Divergent is so broad in the way we want to use it, and it's tending to be different. We will talk a lot about neurodiversity, which we'll get into after this. But even beyond that, we just want to hold space for people that have felt like they were on the outside of the norm. I feel like when you have been made to feel, outside of the norm or outside of the majority, or just feel this sense of otherliness, it really pushes us out of our sense of safety, this internal state of safety. And when we live in that space, it's really difficult to really become your most authentic, genuine self. And I think we've both experienced that, where in certain spaces we kind of conformed and just did what we felt the room needed us to be. And we didn't get to discover who we were until later, and just really be all of who we are.
A social chameleon. We'll talk quite a bit about that. I know you can definitely relate to that, of being who you think that the room needs.
And I came to a point where I was really struggling mentally, and I think that was it, is I was this person who conformed into every space that I went into. I was like, this room needs me to be this person, and this room needs me to be this person. And it got to a point of well, then who am I? Mm-hmm. Who am I when I'm in a room by myself? And that's just not a good feeling to have, of just not knowing who you are. And I think that was the motivation to do the work, put the work in, and find out and be comfortable with who I am, because it didn't feel nice to be a chameleon. I want to be my own being, not just show up to be what the room asks me to be.
Absolutely. All right. So divergence is a very broad term. Today we want to focus a little bit more about neurodiversity and what we mean by that, because that's definitely a term we are going to
talk a lot about,
throw around a lot, and we just kind of want to give a little background information about that. Neurodiversity is this idea that every person you meet is different from you.
Yeah.
We all have different experiences and interactions with the world and interactions with other people, and it makes us who we are. Mm-hmm. We think of like even twins,
Right.
right? There's so much in common, even on like a biological level and a genetic level, but they all have their own experiences and perceptions and interactions, and it makes them diverse from each other.
Mm-hmm. And that is, we are all neurodiverse. We all have different lived experiences. We all have different means of how our body interacts and communicates with itself. So I think just in general, just knowing that piece of like every single person is different than you is quite healing. We did a lot of formal schooling, probably like 300 credit hours together of like advanced schooling. And this was never discussed. And our schooling was in like working with and helping people. And this neurodiversity movement, neurodiversity paradigm was never discussed with us.
Yeah, this is something that we came across and started exploring and diving into and embedding into our lives on our own as adults. And I think this information can be so helpful for people to have a better understanding of who they are.
Yeah. And the kind of the opposite of this neurodiversity movement is kind of what we were like trained in, is that there is kind of this normal to seek. There is this like path to like, if you check these boxes, then you fit this normal, but it's like, doesn't really work that way. And this has been our shift from that kind of mindset or thinking.
So this is the idea of neurodiversity. We are all different. We are all unique. We all are neurodiverse. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the term neurodivergent, right? So explain a little bit about the difference between those.
Yeah. So within the realm of neurodiversity, you have people that fit within that side of neurotypical. They do kind of hit the normative standards. They're neuronormative in the way that they present, whereas you have people who are neurodivergent. And this is an umbrella term that just says the way that our brain and body communicate with each other is different than what is, this normative standard. I think for me, growing up, I really identified a lot with like depression and anxiety. Those were experiences I had from a young age. But I really think those were kind of comorbidities or symptoms of not understanding my operating system. So I'll do my best to like explain this analogy, but like understanding my neurotype or my operating system was kind of like if I am a MacBook and I'm uploading programs for a PC and I'm getting this alert that keeps coming up and says, these don't work. Well, then I'm thinking, well, as a MacBook, I'm broken. But really what needs to happen is I need to upload systems and programs that work for the MacBook. And that has been my life of up until understanding my neurotype was I just kept thinking like, wow, I'm broken. Like I'm in this world and I'm offering myself these things, but it's not working. Like I'm stuck. And so a lot of healing had really started to come for me when I began to recognize and identify as being autistic. And that's a hard thing to say sometimes in certain spaces. And it's hard to say because I don't ever want to take from someone else's experience. And I know that so many people that we work with, they have, different needs, higher support needs than I have. And I never want to minimalize that. And I think that kind of kept me in this like limbo for a long time. It was, I think around 2019 that I first finally said it out loud to you, that this is something that I was, really starting to identify with. I had worked in the schools for a few years, solely in autism-based classrooms. And I was just resonating so much with the experience these kids were having. And I was sitting in meetings and they were telling me I needed to work with these kids on these certain things. And I'm like,
I don't do that.
I don't do it. How do you want me to help them do it if I don't recognize those things or I don't naturally do those things? And it was really this back and forth of like, no, you're not. Don't give yourself that. That's not fair. Don't take that away from someone else. And then finally, once I was able to embrace it, and for me, that did take getting a formal diagnosis. When I was able to embrace it, it really just shifted how I understood and how I approached these difficulties I was having. And that has been life-changing for me. And so it initially started when I was seeking this of like, how can I prove this to someone? And that has completely shifted of like, oh, this information is for me. This information has helped me heal so much and accommodate myself so much. And that's why I want to sit here and share that, is because I know there's other people that are experiencing similar things to me. And I want them to understand their neurotype, whatever that be. This is a piece of just, my story. And I want to be able to share that and give platform to so many other people that experience this differently than I do, because we have this saying that we've heard since the beginning of our time, like getting into our professional work, is if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. And even within myself, of how I present today could be different than how I present tomorrow. Yeah. So I feel like the reason I want to share this is because the pieces of what I've gotten out of identifying with a label, and that was the sense of community, like going out and finally like starting to see other people. This is a huge piece of why I do love social media with all of its, hardship that it does bring. It gave me a sense of community of like, I'm not on this island alone.
I'm not alone.
Yes.
Right.
Other people are experiencing this, and it just gave me such like peace, because I am not the person that would ever go out and say, hey, that's different, or that's odd, you should change. I would never say that to someone else. So why would I say that to me? And it just shifted this internal dialogue of how I spoke to myself, because it was a hard space to be in my head when I had the internal dialogue of, why can't you just be that person? Why can't you just do that? And then to have this and shift and accept and love and embrace the way that my body communicates has been so healing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think you already said it today, but you are such an empathetic person, hyper empathetic. And it's so difficult to hear that, like, you didn't have that for a really long time on yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So the fact that you can, and we're always growing and working on things, but the fact that you have such softer eyes on yourself and such a better understanding is because of all the work you've put in and all the time you've put in and figuring out what accommodations work for you. And what accommodations work for you are going to be different than for me, different than anybody listening. And we just want to share our experiences and highlight experiences of other neurodivergent individuals and share their stories as well, which is our goal of this. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit, again, hard to share, because if I share that, I feel like the expectation of tell me in a very concise, pretty neat way how that internal experience amounts to how I observe you outwardly. And it just doesn't work like that.
Right. And so you're saying if you tell somebody, oh, I'm autistic, and they say, okay, what does that mean for you? Like there's no way that you can summarize that in 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes.
Right.
It's such a bigger picture.
Yeah. And that's what we want to move to, is really starting to put on the platform, what is the internal experience of being neurodivergent? And what may that amount to on how you can observe me or how our interactions might work? That's what we want to put on the platform. Not so much the label itself or the labels themselves, but how can you accommodate people that do, identify as being neurodivergent or a specific label across the board? And I think that kind of brings us right into something we see so frequently, and it's called this like circular reasoning. And we see this all the time in all of the meetings we go to. It's almost happens at least one time in every meeting. And it's kind of like this dialogue you might hear is, why does he have ADHD? Well, because he can't focus. Well, why can't he focus? Well, because he has ADHD. Well, why does he have ADHD? And it just, it amounts to nothing other than, well, they have this label and just look out for it. No.
And that's the end of the story. He does this, therefore it's this.
And that's what we want to move away from. Like, if we're going to identify and utilize these labels, how can we make them more meaningful and not just, this is the title, this is what you can expect. Like, what can we do to make that person's life easier? And that is what we are all about. We really want to help people just understand themselves, because if you can understand yourself, if you can understand your strengths, if you can understand your weaknesses, then you get to decide what accommodations work for you. And then you can relay that to other people, your loved ones around you, of how that can be played out.
Like, I think of me personally, one thing that has really helped me, I am lucky enough to have really bad ADHD paralysis. And I think, like, when I was younger, I don't know if anyone ever said, oh, you're lazy, or like, because I was able to, mask it, hide it, get my things done. But to me, that's how it felt. Is like, oh, I just want to like lay on the couch. It's hard for me to initiate. It's hard for me to get anything done until the very last minute, where like, oh my God, I don't have another minute to waste. And when within the last handful of years, understood like, oh, there's, a name for this, and I'm not the only one that has a hard time with this. I have, first of all, had softer eyes on myself, which is huge, but another thing is, like, I've been able to find these accommodations for me. I am, this, I am the to-do list queen. And I don't have like some cute organized planner where I do it the same way every time. I have a Post-it here. I have a whiteboard here. I have my notes app on my phone. I would be embarrassed to show anybody because it's just list of to-do lists. And that works for me. It keeps me accountable. It keeps me scheduled throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month.
And I think that is like a really good piece to like bring this all in, is we really feel like it's becoming safely divergent. Like, we haven't figured this out and we don't have it down and now we're good. It's just like, the more that we reframe, the more that we accommodate ourselves, the more understanding we grasp of ourselves. It is just this piece that has really helped us, is this process of becoming safely divergent.
We're a work in progress. We've done a lot of work on ourselves, and we know that there's a need out there. So if we can at least spark a conversation for somebody listening, to go on this journey that we are, in the process of, like, that's what we want. That's our goal out of this, is for people to be able to live their authentic self and have a better understanding of their own personal needs.
Yeah.
Should we take a sharp right turn?
I think it's time. Okay. That got a little heavy.
Well, and here's the thing, is we know that some of these topics are going to be heavy, either in a like emotional perspective, or maybe like information dense. And that is how you work. You could sit here and you could have a 6-hour podcast talking about the brain. I know you could. Yeah. That does not work for me. Mm-hmm. My brain is very scattered. And so, like I mentioned earlier, we were talking about, okay, this is your special interest. You love talking about the brain. I love listening to you talk about the brain. But I like talking about the latest serial killer documentary. I have a million small interests that I am very interested in. So what we're hoping to do is each week we have a scattered segment that has absolutely nothing to do with the topic, but I'm full of fun facts. Yeah. And I tell you all these facts all the time, and then you'll 2 days later, you'll be like, oh, did you know that? And you'll tell me, you're like, I think I saw this in a video. I'm like, no, I told you that.
Did you know that crows have facial recognition? Like, yes, I actually shared that with you.
that information came from me. I love like dinner party facts. So each week I plan to do a little deep dive on something and share a little information. So. Talking about our favorite little sky rats the most misunderstood animal, I think. The more I research them, the more I just have such a soft spot for them. So maybe it does relate. Hey, we have soft eyes, and I hope you do after this. Pigeons. What do you know about pigeons?
Pigeons. What do I know about them?
We live in a city, so we see them a lot.
We see a lot of them. The other day, I tossed one an orange peel, and they did not like it. That is what I know about.
Okay.
That's I think the extent of my knowledge about pigeons.
Okay, so 10,000 years ago, we imported them, and we had them as domesticated pets, and they were loved so hard. They're very social. They're very needy creatures. People still have them as pets today, keep in mind. So if you think we can fit one in our tiny little apartment. But they used to be valued so highly, they were even like a religious symbol. Okay. And they were also a very primary food source. Their meat was thought to like cure different diseases. So these birds were loved so much. And then like if you think of from a functional standpoint, like carrier pigeons, I think it's called homing pigeons, where they're really good at finding their way back. They're really good at direction. So they were used for communication. This is thousands of years ago, but even in World War II, 250,000 pigeons were used for communication. So why do we hate them so much? Why are they called sky rats?
Do you think that was like the downfall? Is like once we got like better with our communication,
we didn't need them anymore?
That they were just like pushed off?
I think that's part of it. And then also, they started to escape, go live on their own. They started to figure out, how to just like breed and be on their own. And then overpopulation and that we didn't have a need for them anymore. We found better pets. They just have a bad rep.
Yeah.
They have a bad rep. And what happens is like you often see them in cities because the truth is they're still very dependent on humans to survive. They are not surviving out in a forest. They're dependent on the garbage that gets dumped on the side of the road because they were domesticated creatures, and that's what they're like bred to be. So, but they are so smart. You were talking about crows with facial recognition, which I'm sure I'll talk about someday, but pigeons can do it too. There's a small group of creatures that can recognize themselves in a mirror, and pigeons are one of them. They can recognize familiar faces, so that's why they make really good pets because they're very social and they learn you. They have even taught pigeons how to recognize letters and how to put letters together, and they can recognize the difference between nonsense random letters together and letters that form words. Did you have any idea?
No, I really am going to look at pigeons differently next time we go down to the beach.
We're talking about looking up things with softer eyes. We can throw them in there. And then when I was doing my research, just, a little fun fact about feeding them, because, you tried to throw an orange peel and they were not having it. No. And then, people are wondering like, oh, do we feed pigeons? It's yes and no, because what's going to happen is they're going to remember you. So they're going to come back and they're going to tell their friends, hey, this person's got the goods, like come on over. And that can be okay if you really love pigeons. But if you're the neighbor of someone that loves pigeons and now you have pigeons pooping all over your yard and, going through your garbage, that's one thing. But yeah, if you are looking to connect with a creature out in the wild, they're a very sweet one to do it. And if you're going to feed them, do you have any guesses? It's not orange peels. Something very basic. Corn is what they recommended. And said it's nutritious for them. It's easy for them to pick up.
They can digest it.
They can digest it. So
good to know.
They're very lovable creatures. I think I have a whole new appreciation for them. I think they're awfully sweet. So
and now I do too, because you shared a scattered fact, and I appreciate that.
All right. Shall we wrap her up?
I think that's a wrap. I think we did it. We made it through episode 1, and that feels really nice.
I know. So next week we're going to talk more about our title. So Safely Divergent. Today we focused a lot on the term divergent and what that means and what that means to us. And then next week we'll add in what we talk about when we mean, like what does it mean to be safe? So thank you for listening to episode 1. We are excited for this journey, and we will keep learning and growing.
And we'll see you next week. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you loved the episode, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or follow and subscribe on Spotify. For a deeper dive into this week's topic, follow us on social media at Safely Divergent and check out our blog at safelydivergent.com. Our cover art is by Honor Heindel and our music by Obey Gray. As a reminder, we're just two people with microphones, a lot of thoughts, and some highly questionable hyperfixations. We're not your therapists, doctors, or life coaches, so please do not base major life decisions on our couch chats. Until next time, we hope your nervous system stays safe and social, and your to-do list magically does itself.